This is not a drama video. This is not about or against any other vegan YouTuber or what have you. But the shallow, short-term reason for me thinking to make this video just entered my head when I was out buying these vegan buns with chopped up steamed potato. Yeah, potato in the middle. Not much else. Potato and some spices and herbs. That's about it. What Dr. Greger would approve? Isn't Dr. Greger big on potatoes? Dr. Furman would approve. One of the one vegan doctor or another would approve. Some of them are really pro potato, you know. Anyway, while I was out getting these potatoes for my girlfriend, okay, the short-term impetus for me to think about this was this kind of insult people throw in my face again and again that I'm really bad at taking criticism. And whenever I've tried to engage those people, including like anonymous trolls who have written back saying like, well, you know, maybe you have a point, but have you actually looked at these videos? And sometimes I'm asking them to just look at the videos they're claiming they've watched in the first place, like whatever I said about Nina and Randa. And it's like, well, based on what you're saying here, it sounds like you never actually saw the video. You don't know what my point is. Maybe you heard what, you know, Vegan Cheetah said about it, what Charles Marvel said. Maybe you heard some other rumor, but it looks like you haven't even watched the video you're complaining about. And when I say, oh, but you know, I actually do have videos, some long format videos really responding to criticism. Have you actually looked at any of those? Have you considered? Or maybe it's misapprehensions about the unnatural vegan thing. So one of my super fans is now making a kind of remix. Like, it's not a documentary, a remix of clips about the history of my conflict with the unnatural vegan. But it's like, well, look, I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but, you know, did you actually see what happened in this conflict and how I responded to criticism? Because, like, you know, I made really substantive videos. Like, okay, you disagree with me about domestication of animals. You disagree with me about dog castration. You disagree with me about the concept of having happy cows in your backyard producing happy cow milk. You know, Unnatural Vegan argues that you can still eat eggs under certain circumstances. You can still drink cow milk under certain circumstances. You know, blah, 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 blah. But these people never once has the conversation gone beyond that. You know, whether it was Norvegan or an anonymous troll or not. No, never once has one of those people who's like coming down on me so hard because I can't take criticism just like shown an interest in what they were. They brought the conversation to me. Like, I didn't start the conversation with them, but they were supposedly interested in having a conversation about this stuff. And then the interest is gone. So, you know, a lot of people are bad at responding to criticism. And in the university, in the academic setting, I've seen a lot of that behavior. And I don't leap to the conclusion that someone's a narcissist or a psychopath or what have you. One of my professors in the past at an undisclosed university in Canada, he and I ended up becoming close friends. I'm going to say his name was Mike. It's not his real name. But this professor of mine named Mike. So it was my first time ever being in the classroom with him. And the whole university program was supposed to be providing you with a survey of courses in Asian studies. Now, what does Asian studies mean? That's really debatable, right? But among other obvious flaws with these survey courses was that none of them even mentioned India. There wasn't one book chapter out of one book on India. It was like their definition of Asia was just China, Japan, and those outer islands. Because I mentioned we had this one professor special. So like Polynesia and Micronesia. That was it. That was Asia. And Japan's a pretty huge part of that history. So this professor, it's his first class of that semester. You know, he's teaching the class in this survey course. And he says that Asian studies began after World War II in Chicago and California. Like University of Chicago and some universities in California, they started this Asian study thing after World War II. And I put my hand up and I said, I'm sorry. Were you checking your teeth?
Yep.
In case you think that was a punchline. I said, I'm sorry, but, you know, more than 100 years before that, we had really major disciplines for Asian studies in Germany, in England, even in Switzerland. Like, have you heard of Sanskrit? Have you heard of India? Like, the European study of Asia began way before the end of World War II. Of course, you can go back another century before that, too. You can get into, like, manuscripts in the Vatican, like Jesuit researchers going to China and writing about Chinese history. And, the Portuguese, they go way back. Portuguese records and Spanish records of their voyages out to Asia and the start of that era of European contact. Of course, if you want to, you can go back to ancient Greece. That's kind of another story. Contacts between Europe and Asia and in the Greco-Roman period, Greece and Rome. But within the Dark Ages to present period, there's a lot there. But in this case, and I had some of that stuff fresh in my mind. I was able to name some of the scholars and linguists from Germany and Switzerland and stuff. Well, England too, of course. But I said there's a lot more to this history, and there's also a lot more to Asia. Asia is not just Japan and China. Asia is definitely not just Polynesia and Micronesia. These courses are leaving out India entirely. So you can see this isn't an ad hominem criticism. It's not a criticism of the professor. He freaked out. He could not handle it at all. I could go as far as to say he had a real meltdown in class. It was a very, very difficult time for me in terms of my divorce and my not seeing my daughter. It was a really dark time in my life. And I remember how I felt at the time too. This kind of strange. I wouldn't describe myself as depressed. It was just a time of tremendous sorrow and misery for me. And I don't take that out on other people. Like when I'm unhappy for some other reason, I don't take it out on you. I may not have many redeeming qualities, but that's one. I keep my feelings salient to the problems that generate this feelings. Like I don't get mad at her if my ex-wife is treating me like crap or something. If I have a conflict with my ex-wife or my mom or my dad or something. And I sympathize, but actually pretty much everyone I've ever been in a relationship, they do that. Like my other ex-girlfriends or whatever. If they had a conflict with someone else, then they'd get mad at me. And I sympathize, but it's an important discipline, not to do that. Anyway, so I remember sitting there, and this guy, he's a professor. He's going to grade me or whatever. He's in a position of power. And I remember, he was so angry, and later I can understand why he was so angry and in a sense insecure. He was freaking out because he couldn't handle this criticism. And I remember just sitting there, just reflecting, I feel nothing. This isn't scary to me. This isn't intimidating to me, having this professor, screaming at me. It was happening during class. It happened after class. I stayed after class for an hour. We talked for an hour after class. And at the beginning, he was absolutely freaking out. And I just sat there and took it and replied factually to stuff and talked for an hour solid. Of course, by the end of it, he actually had tremendous intellectual respect for me. He was finding it about, because, he started off just screaming at me like somehow I was destroying his class. And he ended it saying, look, you're way too advanced for this class. You should do a special independent study course instead of taking this class. And he ended it by having this respect for me. And then he started calling me up and trying to make appointments to speak to me. He wanted me to kind of give him history lectures about the history of Myanmar. He was interested in Myanmar a little bit, not his area of expertise, but history of Cambodia and Southeast Asia. He recognized that I knew a lot, more than most people with PhDs, about some of these specific issues and areas, and that he wanted to, he wanted to pick my brain. What do you want to say? He wanted to, he wanted to get some of that. So we went on with time. He and I, we did become, I think you could say, close personal friends. To give an example, I talked to him about my divorce, and he talked to me about his divorce. It progressed from there. But my point is, a lot of people respond badly to criticism. And it doesn't mean they're a narcissist. It doesn't mean they're a psychopath. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. In terms of this Professor Mike, I guess we'll say I later found out about the sources of stress and misery in his life at that time and why probably he was unhappy and, feeling insecure. Remember there was one other time, after we became friends, when he really lost his temper with me. And then later he apologized and he explained, kind of what was on his plate, whatever you want to say, what he was going with. But I've said this so many times lately. Sympathy is an analytical tool. If you're interested in understanding who this person is and what they're doing, okay, so they respond badly to criticism, even when maybe it's their job to take criticism. If you're talking about something that's on topic in an academic setting, these people are being paid to present ideas and hear counter ideas and deal with criticism and be alerted to and address holes and flaws in what they're saying about history. Criticism is that's the real meaning of academic freedom, is the freedom of each party to criticize the other and for us to try to make some kind of progress. I can't even say scientific progress, but some kind of progress through that mutual scrutiny. So with a lot of these charges people make against me, what I got to say is, look, even if you're 100% right, I'm not wrong. It wouldn't be wrong for me to be upset. It wouldn't be wrong for me to handle criticism poorly. And I'm not going to claim I'm perfect. But what I see on the internet, and obviously it's not just me, this is a mass phenomenon, is I've found some fault in you. I've found some flaw in you. And therefore, I can completely dismiss you. I can completely dehumanize you. I can completely write you off. I can refuse to listen to you. That's a big one. Even by email, people say, forget it, I'm not reading this email. I'm not listening to anything you say to me. I've seen that again and again. And, think about how much worse my whole situation would be if with that professor I'd responded that way. If I just said to him, well, you can't handle criticism, and walked out of the room. If I said, well, you can't handle criticism, your behavior is deplorable, I'm not even going to listen to you. I'm shutting this down. Or I'm reporting you. I could have reported to the ombudsman or made a complaint, said this professor, is out of line. If somebody can't take criticism, what does that really mean? What does that really mean? We saw that video. This is really on topic. We saw that video from a young female YouTuber, and she talked about going on a date with a guy, and he made a passing reference, a really brief reference to her being a little bit more chubby in real life than she was in the photographs she gave in the first place. It wasn't even criticism. It was not even intended to criticism. She told the whole story of the scenario. Mm-hmm. And that was it. She kicked him out of her car on the side of the road. The date was over. And she'd gone out with him once or twice before, I forget which. And she was like, that's it. Wow. She never talked to him again. Now, okay, so she can't take criticism. She can't, I'm not trying to demonize the boy. I'm not trying to demonize the girl. But there are two people in their 20s who are out on a date trying to get to know each other, maybe trying to fall in love with each other, whatever. And it all went terribly wrong because she can't take criticism. It's probably a reason why. In terms of her struggles with her weight or her struggles with men or her feeling that this guy, that she really liked him and he never gave her enough of a positive indication that he really liked her. You know what I mean? Like a lack of just that sense of confidence in what they're doing in dating. That is this a real relationship at all? Or, And sure, a lot of people would feel like, hey, I don't want to have to live up to this photograph of me that's on the internet. I want you to love me for who I am. I want you to think I'm beautiful for who I am. Not because of this photographs on the internet. And it may sound off topic, but I think a lot of professors want to say, I want you to appreciate me for who I am, not for this idea you might have because of my PhD or because of that book I published or because of the essay. I think there is something like that, living up to your own hype. I have some expectations because you're a PhD in Asian Studies.
I was just going to say on that same topic, we watched another YouTube video about a girl who lost a lot of weight. And she said that she used to edit her photos on dating apps to make herself look thinner. Right. But she never felt that way when she actually met somebody. She never said if they told her oh, you're more overweight than you look in your photo.
She didn't feel defensive about it.
Yeah, not at all. So just they're both young women in their 20s. It's not just endemic to young women in their 20s. Obviously, you're talking about an older man who's a professor. So
people can be defensive about anything. People can be unreasonable about anything. But then the question is, okay, so now the ball's in my court. This professor is being unreasonable, or this young woman I'm dating is being unreasonable, whatever the situation is. But I'm going to be reasonable. I'm going to find it in me to have the strength and self-discipline to be reasonable for my part, so I'm confident that what I'm doing is good. And, if people take criticism badly, which I may be guilty of, none of the people I've ever addressed, they never sent me an example of this. I know that sounds ridiculous, but, in every case, I was like, oh, well, here's what I actually said with Nina and Randy. Here's what I actually said with A Natural Vegan. Here's the link to the video about this, that, or the other thing. But I'm not perfect. So we did an hour-long discussion with Josh, a.k.a. Vegan Revolution. Horrible conversation. The guy was a horse's ass with me. I don't think I'm perfect, but, you do better. You can watch that video and ask yourself, if you had this guy haranguing you, insulting you, asking you personal questions about your mom and your dad, and just everything to pillory you and insult you, I look back at that and think, well, I did okay. I accepted criticism. I responded to criticism. And the only point he wanted to debate, he dropped as soon as I replied to it. Sorry, kind of interesting in itself, but he wanted to attack me for daring to criticize other YouTubers. I talked about the meaningful role of critique in the progress of a political movement, and it was done. So, look, my point is not that that's a sterling example of how to handle criticism, but I don't think Donald Trump has ever been interviewed by someone as hostile as, Vegan Revolution was toward me. And that's not the way he interviewed Bite Size Vegan or any of the other people he's interviewed in his channel. It was an extraordinarily hostile and insulting interview. And I would like to say I didn't sink to his level. I tried to respond to these things factually, and I kept encouraging him to take on a more positive tone and offering to. I'm not perfect. And so, I also admit openly when I get upset. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, this doesn't upset me. Talking about the controversies, whether unnatural vegan or otherwise, I say, yeah, this is what upset me. But, if people can't take criticism, your role is not to turn around and diagnose them with a serious psychiatric illness for that reason. It's ridiculous. Your role isn't to dehumanize them and marginalize them and dismiss them. I think your role is to try to find some positive way forward. And for me and that one professor, we both found it. We both benefited a lot out of that relationship. We both moved on.